It's Monday, April 29, 2013, and let's talk about what happened this weekend over at xtadevelopers.com. First up, exciting news for people looking to purchase the Samsung Galaxy S4. XDA recognized developer DJR Bliss, a man responsible for lots and lots of previous exploits, has come up with a new exploit that actually was developed for Motorola devices called Moto Chopper. However, this exploit is supposed to also work on the Qualcomm-based Samsung Galaxy S4 devices, specifically the ones for AT&T, T-Mobile, Verizon, things like that. It's a relatively simple batch script or a shell script if you're on Linux or Mac that pushes over the exploit, it sets it to be executable, it runs it, and it pushes over the associated files it needs like BusyBox and whatnot, installs superuser, all of that fun stuff. Now, the author of the article does make sure to mention that this is a bit risky at this point because there's no clear path to fix it if something goes wrong, but do make sure to check out the forum thread, get all the information, see if anybody's having issues with it or anything before you try it yourself. Of course, I always say that. And speaking of doing things to your device and there being a little bit of danger involved, at this point a lot of manufacturers are still locking down devices, but they're providing ways to unlock them. Unfortunately, most of those ways involve removing your warranty. You know, you can unlock your device, but we're not going to do anything to it if you break it. Well, Sony does also provide a method for unlocking the bootloader of the device. You just have to run this application. It does all sorts of stuff and of course kills your warranty at the same time. But from the article posted to the portal, because honestly I've never owned an Xperia device, I don't have experience on this part of it, it says that as a part of the unlocking process, you actually lose all of the DRM specific stuff, which means that things like the Bravia engine and over-the-air updates are not going to work anymore. So that's a bit of a bummer. However, XDA forum member Ricky Wyatt posted the results of some trial and error stuff that he did, whereby you can back up the TA partition of your device, and I'm not going to pretend to know what TA partition is, but that will back up the DRM keys of your device and the locked state of the device. So once you unlock it, you do whatever it is you want to do, you can flash this TA back to it, and it should put you back into a locked state, and it should, you know, everything you've done during that time should still be there as far as I understand. Now, the one thing to keep in mind here, do not go rush off and do this immediately. Make sure that if you're going to do this, one, check that the backup went through successfully. There are some methods listed in the forum post. You just have to go dig through and find them to make sure that it is good. It involves checking MD5 sums and whatnot. And two, never for the love of God, do not flash somebody else's TA partition to your device, or your device will just stop working. It will hard brick, it will never work again. One of the people in the forum managed to flash somebody else's TA partition to his device and bricked it and had to buy a new $600 phone. So please don't do that. As I always say, and I said just a couple of minutes ago, read the forum post, get all of the details. There's lots and lots of pages in that post, so you can glean a lot of information out of it if you read all of it. But let's go ahead and move right along. Late last year, NASA announced that they were going to be launching a Nexus One into orbit. Very big story, involves putting a piece of hardware up there that is open source, piece of hardware that is relatively inexpensive, especially when compared to anything that normally goes up into space, but is significantly more powerful than a lot of stuff that's been up there in the past. There was actually it was mentioned in the post, there was an old meme where an astronaut standing on the moon saying, "So your new smartphone is more powerful than the Apollo 11. Well, I'm glad to see it's going to get you to the moon." I definitely butchered that one. But to follow up on that story, NASA has just sent 3 Nexus Ones into space to use as satellites. Now, traditionally, a satellite is an extremely expensive thing. Like I said, anything that goes into space is traditionally ridiculously expensive, but they say that these satellites cost in the neighborhood of $3,500 to $7,000, I think. Which, in terms of budget for something like that, means that they can put a whole lot more satellites up there very quickly, on the low cost, very lightweight, things like that. And of course, it's not going to have the traditional battery. It's going to have a larger lithium-ion battery and then a battery array to power it. And I think one of them is actually going to have a solar panel array on top of it to keep it powered. So very, very cool stuff there. Again, very low cost, low power, but with a huge array of sensors and radio communication stuff. I think the radio stuff's all going to be disabled, but it's there. Probably a vanilla version of Android, if not a very highly customized, probably proprietary version of Android. That would actually be something I'd be curious to see. What are they running on top of the Nexus Ones? Are they using AOSP? Are they using something home built? And if so, why aren't they releasing the source? I know they're not selling the device, but if you're changing Android, you really ought to release the source. But it definitely does go to show what you can do with a relatively low-cost device. I mean, at the same time, there are people that are buying Raspberry Pis, a little $35 computer, attaching them to a balloon and sending them up to the edge of space to take photos and to send back data and things like that. I've got a buddy who's talking about doing something like that. So if he does move in that direction, I might just take the camera out there and see what happens. But anyway, very cool story. NASA's using Android to make the world a more communicative place, or at least to have better sensors in orbit that are very, very low cost. So that's about all for that. Moving on. Before, we talked about the HTC One cases that are coming from Cruiser Light and that there were going to be 10 given away. Those 10 have been announced. You can find the link to all of those on the portal post, simply because I'm terrible at reading usernames and I'm not going to butcher all of those. And additionally, 2 other videos were posted to XDA Developer TV this weekend, both of them done by Jace, and both of them in an Android app development series he's doing. The first one was about using Exposed Framework for Android to help rapidly develop Android applications. And the second one was all about using Mono to develop Android applications, which I seem to remember talking about in one of last week's videos. So if you'd like to know more about either one of those things, do make sure to check out the videos here on the XDA Developers channel on YouTube. But as for me, that's going to be about all for today. As always, make sure to hit that like button down below if you like this video, and subscribe to receive our content as soon as it becomes available. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you again on Friday.